They say the coldest night in Wyoming history killed 17 people. I should have been number 18. But the creature who saved me was colder than death itself and lonelier than anyone I'd ever known. My name is Elara Thorne. I'm 22 years old, and 3 days ago I believed a white dress would save my life. I was wrong. The clock in Frostmere struck 3 in the morning when my world ended. Not with thunder or flame, but with the creak of a door and the sound of footsteps I'd learned to fear. I sat in my attic room beneath a crooked roof needle moving through white silk by candlelight. My fingers bled from 2 days of work without rest, but I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. This dress was supposed to be my future. $50. That's what Rowena had promised me. Enough to rent a room for 2 months. Enough to eat something besides stale bread. Enough to stop being invisible in a town that looked through me like I was made of glass. The silk caught the firelight as I worked, turning gold and silver in my hands. It was beautiful, the most beautiful thing I'd ever made. My mother taught me to sew when I was 10 years old, back when she was still my mother, and not just a woman who'd forgotten she had a daughter. Kindness is the stitch that holds the world together, Elora, she used to say, guiding my clumsy fingers through fabric. I tried to hold on to that memory as I pushed the needle through the final seam. But memories fade when you're cold and hungry and alone. The door slammed open. Rowena stood in the doorway, backlit by the hallway lamp, and I knew immediately that something had gone wrong. Her face carried that particular expression I'd learned to recognize, the look of a woman who'd made a decision that would hurt me and didn't care. "Give me the dress," she said. No greeting, no explanation. Just those 4 words. I looked down at the white silk in my lap, at the tiny, perfect stitches I'd labored over for 48 hours. "It's not finished," I said quietly. "I need another hour, then I'll deliver it to—" I said, "Give me the dress." Rowena crossed the room in 3 strides and tore the fabric from my hands. The needle caught my finger, drawing a thin line of blood that stained the white silk. "What are you doing?" I stood up so fast the chair fell backward. "That's for Mrs. Patterson. She's paying $50. You promised—" Plans changed. Rowena folded the dress over her arm. "I sold it to pay a debt. Gambling debt, if you must know." The room seemed to tilt. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. "You can't," I whispered. "I worked 2 days. You promised me that money. I need it to—" The slap came so fast I didn't see it coming. My head snapped to the side and I tasted copper. "You need—" Rowena's voice was ice. "Let me tell you what I need, girl. I need you to stop being a burden in my house. I need you to stop eating my food and burning my candles and taking up space like you have any right to be here." She reached into her pocket and threw 3 copper coins on the floor. They hit the wooden boards with tiny metallic sounds that seemed impossibly loud. "There's your payment. Take it and get out." I stared at the coins. 3 pieces of copper. Maybe enough to buy a loaf of bread. Definitely not enough to rent a room. Not enough to survive more than a day. "Get out." I looked up at her. "It's 3 in the morning. There's a blizzard outside. The temperature is—" "Not my problem." Rowena walked to the door. "You have 5 minutes to gather your things and leave. If you're still here when I come back, I'll have the sheriff remove you." She left. The door didn't slam this time. It closed with a soft click that was somehow worse than any shout. I stood there for a long moment, trying to make sense of a world where a woman could throw her stepdaughter into a blizzard without a second thought. But understanding didn't change anything. I picked up the 3 copper pieces and put them in my pocket. Then I grabbed my father's old coat, the only thing I still owned that had belonged to him, and wrapped it around my shoulders. It smelled like wood smoke and old leather and memories of a man who'd loved me unconditionally until the night a blizzard took him from me. I was 12 when my father died. He'd gone out to check on a neighbor's livestock during a storm and never came back. They found him 3 days later, frozen in a drift half a mile from our house. His hand was stretched out toward home, like he'd been trying to crawl back to us. No one had helped him. No one had heard him calling. He died alone in the cold, and I swore I would never let that happen to anyone else. But promises are easy to make when you're warm and safe. I walked down the stairs and out into the night without looking back. The cold hit me like a physical blow. -40 degrees, according to the radio I'd heard earlier. The kind of cold that steals your breath and turns your skin numb in seconds. The kind of cold that kills. Frostmere was silent under its blanket of snow. The houses stood dark and shuttered, every door locked against the night. I walked past the bakery where I used to buy day-old bread, past the church where I'd prayed for things to get better, past the tailor's shop where I'd worked until the owner's son decided I was too poor to marry. I stopped in front of a house I knew too well. Warm light glowed behind thick curtains. Smoke rose from the chimney. Gideon Gray lived there. The boy who'd promised to marry me exactly 1 year and 3 months ago. The boy who'd disappeared the moment I lost my job and couldn't afford decent dresses. There was a time I would have knocked on that door. A time I believed he'd open it and pull me inside. But that time was gone. I turned away and kept walking. The edge of town came faster than I expected. One moment I was passing the last house, and the next I was staring at the dark line of trees that marked the beginning of the wilderness. The Rocky Mountains rose in the distance, invisible in the storm, but present like a weight on the horizon. Everyone in Frostmere knew you didn't go into those mountains at night. Everyone knew the stories about people who wandered into the forest and never came back. About the old castle that stood somewhere in the heights, home to creatures that hadn't been human for a very long time. But I'd spent 3 years preparing for this moment without knowing it. 3 years listening to my father's old radio, teaching myself meteorology from crackling weather reports. 3 years studying maps of the mountains, memorizing every trail and landmark. I'd told myself I was just being prepared. The truth was I'd been planning my escape. I stepped into the forest. The trees closed around me like a door shutting. The wind screamed through branches heavy with snow. My father's coat was already crusted with ice. I pulled out my mental map and tried to orient myself. There was a cave about 2 miles northeast, a place I'd marked 3 years ago. If I could reach it, I might survive the night. But the storm was worse than I'd calculated. The wind kept changing direction. Snow filled my tracks as fast as I made them. And the cold crept into my bones and made my thoughts slow and heavy. I kept moving anyway. My father's voice echoed in my memory. Kindness doesn't mean letting the world kill you, Elara. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is survive. So I survived. Step after frozen step. I don't know how long I walked. Time stopped meaning anything when every moment was the same fight against the cold. But at some point I realized I was lost. Completely hopelessly lost, and that's when I saw him. A figure stood alone in a small clearing, motionless as a statue. He was tall and dark against the white snow, wearing what looked like a long coat that didn't move in the wind. Relief flooded through me. Another person. Someone else caught in the storm. Someone I could help. I stumbled forward. He didn't turn around, didn't move. Just stood there with his back to me, still as death. Hey, my voice came out weak. Hey, you need to move. You'll freeze if you stand still. No response. Terror shot through me. I knew that stillness. I'd seen it before 12 years ago when they'd brought my father's body home. No, I whispered. No, not again. I threw myself forward and wrapped my arms around the stranger from behind, pressing my face against his back, trying to share what little warmth I had left. Hold on, I gasped. Please, hold on. I've got you. You're not alone. You'll freeze out here, but I won't let you. I won't let the cold take you like it took him. The man beneath my arms was cold, colder than the snow, colder than the wind, colder than anything living should be. But he moved. Slowly, deliberately, he turned within my embrace. Strong hands caught my wrists, not roughly, but firmly, and I found myself looking up into a face that stole what little breath I had left. He was beautiful in the way winter is beautiful, sharp and pale and utterly inhuman. His skin looked like marble in the moonlight. His hair was black as a raven's wing. But his eyes were silver, pure silver, like mirrors reflecting stars. You hugged me, he said. His voice was deep and quiet with a quality that made me think of thunder rolling across distant mountains. Not angry or surprised, just confused, like I'd done something he couldn't quite comprehend. I tried to step back, but my legs wouldn't work anymore. The cold had finally won. I felt myself falling. The stranger caught me before I hit the ground. You tried to save me, he said, and this time there was something else in his voice, something that might have been wonder. You thought I was dying and you tried to save me. I wanted to answer, wanted to explain that of course I tried to save him because that's what decent people do. But the darkness was rising like a tide and I was so tired of fighting. The last thing I heard before consciousness left me was his voice, softer than before. 500 years and no one has touched me with kindness. Then the world went black. I woke to warmth. Heat surrounded me like water seeping into my frozen bones. I was lying on something soft, a bed with blankets that felt like silk and pillows that smelled faintly of cedar and old stone. I opened my eyes. The room was enormous. Vaulted ceilings disappeared into shadows. Stone walls were carved with swirling patterns. Tapestries hung between tall windows. A massive fireplace dominated one wall, flames dancing with strange blue-white light. And sitting in a high-backed chair near the fire, watching me with those impossible silver eyes, was the man from the forest. I sat up too fast. The room spun. Easy. His voice carried the same quiet quality. You were nearly dead when I brought you here. Your body needs time to recover. I stared at him. In the firelight, he looked even less human than he had in the forest. His face was too perfect. His stillness was too complete. Where am I? My home. He gestured slightly. You're safe here. The storm cannot reach you. Safe. But I'd grown up on stories about the castle in the mountains, about the creature who lived there. You're him, I whispered, the Vampire King. From the stories. He tilted his head slightly. My name is Dorian Ashcroft, and yes, I am what your stories call a monster. He said it simply without pride or shame, just stating a fact. I should have been terrified, but all I felt was a strange recognition. Why did you save me? You tried to save me first. He leaned forward. Do you understand how rare that is? How remarkable? I thought you were dying. I was standing in a blizzard that would kill any human in minutes. Most people would have assumed I was already dead and kept walking. His gaze held mine. You didn't. You stopped. You tried to share your warmth with a stranger colder than death itself. That's just what you do when someone needs help. Is it? Something flickered across his face. I have walked this world for 5 centuries, Elara Thorne. In all that time, I can count on one hand the number of people who have touched me with kindness, and most of them are dead. He knew my name. That should have frightened me, but somehow it didn't. How long was I unconscious? 3 hours. The sun will rise in another 2. You should rest until then. And after the sun rises, what happens to me? Dorian was quiet for a long moment. The fire crackled. Wind howled against the windows. I heard them, he said finally. The wolves. They're hunting tonight. Hunting what? His eyes met mine. Me. The simple honesty of it struck me harder than any dramatic declaration. Why, because I am old and powerful and alone. He stood and walked to the window. Because there are creatures in this world who believe the time of vampire kings has passed. Because I have enemies who have waited centuries for a moment of weakness. He turned back to me. They know you're here now. They saw me carry you inside, and they will use that knowledge however they can. Then let me leave. I started to push back the covers. I'll go. I'll tell them I don't know anything. You'll die. His voice was flat and certain. The storm outside will kill you in less than an hour. And even if you survive the cold, the wolves would find you. They're not ordinary wolves, Elara. They're werewolves, and they don't leave witnesses. I sank back against the pillows. So I'm trapped here. You're protected here. He returned to his chair. There is a difference. For how long? Until the storm passes. 3 days, perhaps. He paused. After that, you're free to leave if you wish. I won't stop you. 3 days. Trapped in a castle with the vampire king hunted by werewolves. I saw you touch your wrist, Dorian said suddenly. You have a scar there. Instinctively, my hand went to the crescent-shaped mark on my left wrist. Accident. What? I said shortly. I was trying to open a window that was stuck. The glass broke. You were trying to escape. It wasn't a question. Somehow he knew. My mother had just married her second husband. He'd locked me in my room for talking back. I looked down at the scar. I thought if I could get out the window, I could run away, find somewhere better. But you couldn't. The glass cut too deep. By the time my mother found me, I'd lost so much blood I couldn't stand. I traced the crescent shape. She held my wrist closed while we waited for the doctor. She sang to me, told me stories, promised things would get better. Did they, for a little while. I looked up at him. Then my father died, and my mother stopped singing. Dorian was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He reached up and pulled aside the collar of his shirt, revealing a scar on his left shoulder. It was old, so old it looked more like a shadow than a mark. 5 centuries ago, he said softly. The night I lost someone I loved. The night I learned that immortality doesn't protect you from pain. It just makes the pain last longer. I stared at his scar. What was her name? Of Seraphina. He said it like a prayer, like a curse. She was human, brave and bright and so full of life it hurt to be near her. He pulled his collar back into place, and when she died, she took the warmth from my world. The firelight flickered, and for a moment I saw past the vampire king to the man beneath, lonely and grieving, and trying to remember what warmth felt like. I'm sorry, I said quietly. Don't be. He looked at me. She taught me something important before she died. She taught me that kindness is real, that it exists even in a world full of cruelty and darkness. He stood and moved toward the door. You should rest now. There are clean clothes in the wardrobe if you need them. Food will be brought to you when you wake. And Elara, I looked up at him. You're safe here, I give you my word. No one will harm you while you're under my protection. Then he left, closing the door softly behind him. I lay back and stared at the ceiling, trying to process everything that had happened. I'd been thrown out into a blizzard. I'd gotten lost in the mountains. I'd tried to save a vampire king, and now I was lying in a bed made of silk in a castle 5 centuries old. None of it made sense. But as I drifted towards sleep, I realized something strange. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't feel alone. I woke to daylight streaming through tall windows and the smell of fresh bread. Someone had left a tray on the table beside my bed. Bread, cheese, fruit, and honey in a small crystal jar. My stomach growled loudly enough to echo off the stone walls. I ate quickly, too hungry to care about manners. The bread was still warm. The cheese was sharp and creamy. The fruit tasted like summer. When I finished, I explored the room. The wardrobe stood against one wall, tall and dark and carved with strange patterns. Inside, I found dresses in styles I didn't recognize. Some looked medieval, some looked modern. All were beautiful. I chose the simplest one, a deep blue gown with long sleeves and a high collar. It fit perfectly, which should have been impossible. I was lacing up the boots when someone knocked. Come in, I called, half expecting Dorian. Instead, an old man entered. He was small and slightly bent, with white hair and pale blue eyes. He wore what looked like a doctor's coat. Good morning, Miss Thorne. I'm Dr. Aldrich Morgrave. I've been asked to check on your recovery. His voice was gentle and precise. I'm fine, I said automatically. Better than fine. I should have frozen to death last night. Yes, you should have. He moved closer. May I? He gestured toward my hands. I held them out, and he examined my fingers carefully. You were very lucky. No permanent damage. Your core temperature was dangerously low when the king brought you in, but we managed to warm you slowly enough to avoid shock. Myself and Sienna, she's the castle's head of security. He released my hands. She'll want to meet you eventually. She's very protective of the king. You're a vampire too, I said. 612 years old, give or take a decade. He smiled slightly. I was a physician in life. I remain one in death, though my patients are considerably more durable now. And you served Dorian. I consider him a friend. Dr. Aldrich moved to the window. I've known him for 3 centuries. I was there the night Seraphina died. I watched him close himself off from the world. I've seen him walk through centuries of loneliness like a man walking through an endless winter. He turned back to me. Until last night. Last night, for the first time in half a millennium, I saw something change in his eyes. Something warm. I didn't know what to say. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to understand what you did. His pale eyes held mine. When you hugged the king in that forest, you did something no one has done in centuries. You saw him not as a monster or a legend. You saw him as a person who needed help. And that simple act, it reminded him that warmth still exists in the world. Before I could respond, another knock sounded. This time I recognized the quality of the silence that followed. Come in, I said. Dorian entered. He wore different clothes than last night, a simple black shirt and dark pants, but he still moved with that impossible stillness. I see you've met Dr. Aldrich. He was just checking on me. I stood. Thank you for the dress and the food and not letting me freeze to death. A slight smile touched his lips. It transformed his face, making him look younger and more human. You're welcome, though I suspect you would have found a way to survive even without my intervention. I've had a lot of practice. The smile faded. He exchanged a glance with Dr. Aldrich. Aldrich, would you give us a moment? Of course. The old doctor bowed slightly. Miss Thorne, it was a pleasure. He left. Dorian moved to the window and stood looking out at the storm. There's something you should know, he said, about why you're really here. My stomach tightened. I thought I was here because you saved me from freezing. That's part of it. He turned to face me. But there's more. Something I haven't told you yet. Are you going to eat me? The question came out before I could stop it. Dorian blinked, clearly surprised. Then that slight smile returned. No, I don't feed on humans. Haven't for 3 centuries. Then what? He was quiet for a long moment. 3 days from now, there will be a full moon. And when the moon is full, I change. Change how I lose control. The bloodlust becomes overwhelming. I become exactly the monster the stories say I am. His gaze held mine. It's called the Blood Moon Curse. It was placed on me centuries ago by a witch who believed I needed to be punished for Seraphina's death. But you said you don't kill humans. Not anymore. Not for 3 centuries. But during the full moon, I don't have a choice. He moved closer. Unless I have what's called a Moonlight Anchor. Someone whose presence keeps me tethered to my humanity. Someone whose light is strong enough to hold back the darkness. Understanding dawned slowly. Seraphina was your anchor. Yes. For 20 years, she kept me sane. Kept me human, or as human as a vampire can be. And when she died, he trailed off. Let's just say I've spent the last 5 centuries locked in a cell deep beneath this castle chained with silver that burns my skin screaming until my voice gives out. The image made my chest ache. Why are you telling me this? Because 3 nights ago when the moon was still waning, I felt something I haven't felt in centuries. Standing in that forest with your arms around me, I felt anchored, tethered, like there was a rope connecting me to the world again. He took a step closer. I don't know if it will work. I don't know if you can truly serve as a moonlight anchor, but I'm asking if you're willing to try, because the alternative is 3 more nights of chains and silver and screaming. And I'm so very tired of screaming, Elara. I stared at him, at this ancient, powerful creature who was asking me, a poor girl from nowhere, to be his lifeline to humanity. What would I have to do? Just be near me. When the moon rises, when the curse takes hold, you would need to stay close. Touch my hand. Speak to me. Remind me who I am. That's all. That's everything. He held my gaze. But I won't force you. If you want to leave when the storm ends, I'll escort you back to Frostmere myself. This is your choice, Elara. I thought about Frostmere, about Rowena throwing me into the storm, about Gideon's dark windows, about a town full of people who'd looked through me like I was invisible. I thought about my father dying alone in the snow because no one helped him. I thought about Dorian spending centuries screaming in the dark because no one could anchor him to the light. If I say yes, I said slowly, I'm not your prisoner. I'm your partner. We work together as equals. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or hope. Equals, he repeated softly. I haven't had an equal in centuries. Then it's about time. I held out my hand. 3 weeks. I'll stay for 3 weeks. If it works, if I can help you through the full moon, we'll figure out what comes next. But if it doesn't work, or if I want to leave you, let me go. Deal. He looked at my outstretched hand for a long moment. Then slowly he reached out and took it. His skin was cold. But when his fingers closed around mine, I felt something else. Something that might have been warmth trying to remember how to exist. Deal, he said. Equals. And somewhere deep in the ancient stones of the castle, I could have sworn I heard something crack. Like ice beginning to thaw after a very long winter. The first thing I learned about living in a castle full of vampires was that silence had texture. Not the empty silence of an abandoned room. This was a living silence thick with the presence of creatures who didn't need to breathe. It was unnerving. The second thing I learned was that Dorian kept his promises. He'd said we would work as equals, and he meant it. Every decision about my time in the castle, he asked my opinion. Every plan for the approaching full moon he discussed with me first. On my second day, he brought me to a library. Books lined every wall. A fire crackled in the hearth. 2 chairs sat facing each other. I thought you might want to understand what you've agreed to, Dorian said. Everything written about vampires, werewolves, and the blood moon curse is here. You're welcome to read whatever you like. I ran my fingers along the spines. Some were ancient, others looked new. All represented knowledge I'd never dreamed of accessing. You're just going to let me read your secrets. They're not secrets if I'm giving you permission. He sat with that impossible stillness. Besides, if you're going to help me through the full moon, you should know what you're facing. Knowledge is armor, Elara. I pulled down a book about the blood moon curse and settled into the other chair. The fire warmed my back. And for the first time in years, when I felt something close to peace. Can I ask you something? Always. Why did Seraphina die? What happened? The silence that followed had weight, had grief compressed into something solid and heavy. She was murdered, Dorian said finally, poisoned with silver and werewolf venom, a combination that would kill even the strongest vampire, let alone a human woman. I looked up sharply. Who killed her? Members of my own council, vampires I'd trusted for centuries. His eyes reflected the firelight. They believed she made me weak. that my love for a human woman compromised my ability to rule. So they removed what they saw as a problem. Well, that's not weakness, I said, anger flaring in my chest. That's murder. That's betrayal. I know. He leaned back. I executed 3 of them personally, exiled 2 others, but the damage was done. Serafina was gone, and I swore I would never let anyone close enough to hurt me that way again. Until me. Until you. He met my eyes. But you're different, Elara. You didn't ask to be here. You're not trying to manipulate or control me. You're just kind. For no reason except that kindness is who you are. I didn't know what to say, so I went back to my book. But I felt his words settle over me like a blanket. We sat in comfortable silence for an hour. Finally, he spoke. There's someone I'd like you to meet, if you're willing. Who? Her name is Sienna Wolfsbane. She's my head of security and one of the few people in this castle I trust completely. He stood. She's also been protecting me during the full moon for the last century. She should know you're here. I followed him through winding corridors I was slowly learning to navigate. We descended a staircase that spiraled down into the mountain itself. The air grew colder. The stones looked older. The training room was exactly what it sounded like. A vast space carved from living rock lit by torches that burned with blue-white flames. Weapons lined the walls, and in the center a woman moved through combat forms with deadly precision. She was tall and lean with dark skin and silver hair pulled back in a tight braid. She wore fighting leathers, and when she spun to face us, her eyes were the deep amber of a wolf's. My king. She bowed slightly, then fixed those amber eyes on me. And this must be the human who hugged you in a blizzard. Elara Thorne, Dorian said. This is Sienna Wolfsbane. Wolfsbane, I repeated. That's an interesting name for someone who fights werewolves. Sienna's lips curved into something that might have been a smile. My father was a werewolf. My mother was a vampire. I am what happens when 2 species that should be enemies fall in love anyway. She set down the sword she'd been holding. I hunt werewolves because I know how they think, how they fight, how they die. The casual way she said it sent a chill down my spine. Sienna has kept me alive through 100 full moons, Dorian said quietly. She knows how to restrain me without killing me, how to keep me locked away until the curse passes. But restraint isn't healing, Sienna said, studying me with those unsettling amber eyes. For a century, I've watched my king chain himself like a rabid animal once a month. I've listened to him scream. I've seen what the curse does to him. She took a step closer. So tell me, Elara Thorne, do you really think a hug in the snow is going to fix centuries of suffering? The challenge in her voice was clear. She wasn't being cruel, just protective, testing whether I was strong enough. I don't know, I said honestly. I don't know if I can help him. I don't even know exactly what a Moonlight Anchor does, but I know what it feels like to watch someone you care about suffer and not be able to stop it. I pulled up my sleeve, showing the crescent scar. I was 8 years old when I got this. My stepfather had locked me in my room for talking back. I tried to escape through a window. The glass broke and cut deep enough that I thought I might bleed to death. I met Sienna's amber gaze. My mother held my wrist closed for 2 hours while we waited for the doctor. She sang to me, told me stories, kept me conscious by reminding me I wasn't alone. I lowered my sleeve. I don't know if I can be Dorian's anchor, but I know what it means to hold someone together when they're breaking, and I'm willing to try. Sienna was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. You've got a spine. That's good. You'll need it. She turned to Dorian. The preparations for the full moon are almost complete. The silver chains are ready. The cell is reinforced. If the anchor bond doesn't work, we'll do what we've always done. I know. Dorian's voice was carefully neutral. Thank you, Sienna. We climbed back up the spiral staircase in silence. But when we reached the main floor, Dorian stopped. What you said to Sienna about your mother holding you together. He looked at me. Did it work? Did she keep you from breaking? For a little while. I thought back to that day. But eventually she let go. She remarried. She chose her new husband over me. And I learned that even the people who save you can leave you behind. I won't, Dorian said quietly. I looked up at him, surprised. I won't leave you behind, Elara. Whatever happens during the full moon, whatever comes after, you have my word. As long as you want to stay, you have a place here. The sincerity in his voice made my chest tight. Why do you care? You barely know me. Because you remind me what it feels like to be human. He reached out slowly and touched my hand. Just fingertips against fingertips. And I've forgotten for so long that even a glimpse of humanity feels like coming home. His skin was cold against mine. But beneath the cold, I felt something else. A pulse. A heartbeat. I didn't pull away. We stood there in the corridor, fingers barely touching, while the castle's textured silence wrapped around us. On the third day, Dr. Aldrich found me in the library again. "May I join you?" "Please." He sat with careful grace. "The king seems different since you arrived." "Different how? Lighter, less burdened." He folded his hands. "I've known Dorian for 3 centuries, Miss Thorne. I've seen him in love and in grief. I've watched him close himself off from the world piece by piece, year by year, until he was more stone than man." He leaned forward slightly. "2 days ago, I heard him laugh. It was quiet and brief, but it was real. I haven't heard him laugh in 2 centuries." I set down my book. "What made him laugh?" "You did. He was telling me about how you demanded to be treated as equals, how you negotiated terms like you were brokering a treaty instead of accepting charity." Dr. Aldrich smiled. He found it delightful, refreshing, human. "I'm not trying to change him. I know, that's why it's working." He stood and moved to the window. "There's something you should understand about the blood moon curse. Something the books won't tell you." I waited. "The curse doesn't just steal his control during the full moon. It feeds on isolation, on loneliness. Every month he spends alone, the curse grows stronger." He turned back to me. "Seraphina didn't just anchor him with her presence. She reminded him why humanity was worth holding on to, why connection mattered, why he should keep fighting. And when she died, the curse nearly consumed him completely. It took me and Sienna and 3 other vampires to restrain him that first full moon. He almost killed all of us." Dr. Aldrich's expression was grave. "Every month since then has been a battle, and every month he loses a little more of himself." The weight of what he was telling me settled on my shoulders. "So if you fail, we'll do what we've always done. Chain him, lock him away, wait for the moon to pass." He met my eyes. "But Elara, if you succeed, if you can truly anchor him, you'll give him back something he hasn't had in centuries. Hope." Before I could respond, a bell rang somewhere deep in the castle. Not loud, but it carried a note of urgency. Dr. Aldrich's expression tightened. "That's the perimeter alarm. Someone's at the gates." We rushed through the corridors. By the time we reached the main hall, a small crowd had gathered. Dorian stood at the center, speaking with Sienna in low, urgent tones. Other vampires I hadn't met stood nearby, and kneeling on the floor, hands bound and face bruised, was my sister. "Isolde." The name came out as barely a whisper. She looked up, and her eyes, the same green as mine, filled with tears. "Elara, oh God, Elara, I'm so sorry." I pushed through the crowd and dropped to my knees beside her. Up close, I could see the damage more clearly. Her lip was split, one eye was swollen, and her hands were shaking. "What happened? Who did this to you?" "I did it to myself." She laughed, but it came out broken. "I got into a fight with Mother's new husband. He said something about you, about how you probably froze to death in the storm, and I lost it. I hit him. So he hit me back, harder." Tears streamed down her face. "Then Mother told me the truth, about the dress, about how she sold it to pay gambling debts, about how she threw you out knowing you'd die." Isolde's voice cracked. "And about the other thing, the thing she didn't tell you." Ice formed in my stomach. "What other thing?" "She sold you, Elara. Not just the dress, you." Isolde fumbled with her bound hands and pulled out a folded paper. "This is a contract between Mother and someone named Victor Ravenscar. She promised to deliver you to him for $5,000. The paper fell from her shaking hands. I picked it up, barely able to process what I was reading. A contract, signed by Rowena and countersigned by someone with elaborate handwriting. A promise to deliver one Elara Thorne to Victor Ravenscar for the purpose of leverage against Dorian Ashcroft, Vampire King of Nightshade. I looked up at Dorian. His face was expressionless, but his eyes had gone cold and hard. "Victor Ravenscar," I said. "Who is he?" "One of my elder council members." Dorian's voice was carefully controlled, and one of the vampires who murdered Seraphina centuries ago. The pieces fell into place with horrible clarity. "He wants to use me against you." Yes, Dorian took the contract from my numb fingers. "During the full moon, when I'm at my most vulnerable, he planned to have you brought before me, to make me choose between the curse and your safety, to prove that loving a human makes me weak." "That's sick." "That's Victor." He helped me to my feet, then turned to Sienna. "Unbind her sister. She came here to warn us. That makes her an ally." Sienna cut Isolde's ropes. My sister rubbed her wrists, wincing. "I'm sorry," she said again, looking at me with red-rimmed eyes. I left you behind when I married Marcus. I chose money over my own sister. I'm so sorry, Elara. I wanted to be angry, but looking at her bruised face and shaking hands, all I felt was tired. Why now? Why come here now to warn me? Because you're my sister. Because I should have protected you years ago and I didn't. Because, she took a shaky breath, because I heard Mother laughing about your death. Laughing. And I realized I'd become someone I hated. Isolde reached out tentatively and I let her take my hand. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know the truth. About Victor. About the full moon. About what they're planning. What are they planning? Dorian asked sharply. Victor is gathering werewolves. 30 of them, maybe more. He's promised them free access to Bloodstone Valley if they help him attack the castle during the full moon. Isolde looked at him directly. He wants you dead, King Ashcroft. And he wants to make sure your human anchor can't save you. The hall erupted into noise. Vampires arguing. Sienna barking orders. Dr. Aldrich moving to Dorian's side. But I barely heard any of it. Because I was watching Dorian's face as he processed what my sister had said. Watching him calculate odds and make decisions that would determine whether we lived or died. This was the Vampire King, not the lonely creature who'd saved me from freezing. This was a predator who'd survived centuries of betrayal, and somehow I was supposed to anchor him to his humanity in 3 days. Dorian raised his hand and the hall fell silent. Sienna, double the perimeter guards. I want vampires stationed at every entrance to the mountain passes. If 30 werewolves are coming, I want to know about it before they reach the gates. Yes, my king. Aldrich, prepare the medical wing. If we're going to war, we'll need supplies for silver poisoning and werewolf venom. Already done. And Elara Thorne, he turned to my sister. You came here at great personal risk to warn us. For that, you have my gratitude and my protection. You're welcome to stay in the castle until this is over. Isolde bowed her head. Thank you, your majesty. Dorian looked at me last. Elara, I need to speak with you. Privately. He didn't wait for an answer, just turned and walked toward a door. I followed, leaving Isolde with Dr. Aldrich and the organized chaos of vampires preparing for battle. The room beyond was smaller and more intimate. A bedroom, I realized. His bedroom. Simple furniture, dark colors, a window that looked out over the mountains. I should have anticipated this, Dorian said, pacing. Victor has been quiet for too long. I knew he was planning something, but I thought I had more time. You couldn't have known my mother would sell me. Couldn't I? He stopped and looked at me. I've lived for centuries, Elara. I've seen every variation of human cruelty. Parents selling children, lovers betraying each other. I should have expected this. Stop, I said firmly. He blinked, clearly surprised. Stop blaming yourself for other people's choices. My mother sold me because she's selfish and cruel. Victor wants to kill you because he's afraid of change. None of that is your fault. But you're in danger because of me. I'm alive because of you. I crossed the room and stood directly in front of him. If you hadn't found me in that storm, I'd be dead. Frozen in a snowdrift with no one to mourn me. Instead, I'm here. I'm warm. I'm learning things I never dreamed of knowing. And yes, there are 30 werewolves coming to kill us, but at least I get to face them standing next to someone who treats me like an equal. Dorian stared at me. You're not afraid. I'm terrified, I admitted, but I'm also tired of running. Tired of being treated like I don't matter. Tired of watching people I care about suffer because I'm too weak to help them. You're not weak. Then prove it. I held his gaze. Trust me to be your anchor, not because you're desperate or because you have no other choice, but because you believe I'm strong enough to do it. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then slowly he reached out and took my hand. Not with his fingertips this time, but properly. His palm against mine, fingers intertwined. I believe you, he said quietly. I believe you're strong enough, brave enough, kind enough. His eyes met mine, and that terrifies me more than the werewolves ever could. Why, bah? Because believing in you means having hope, and hope is dangerous for someone like me. Hope means having something to lose. I squeezed his hand, feeling the cold of his skin and the unexpected strength beneath it. Then we'll just have to make sure we don't lose. A knock on the door interrupted us. Sienna entered without waiting for permission. My king, we have another problem. Of course we do. Dorian released my hand. What is it? The werewolf pack sent a messenger. He's at the gates under a white flag. He says he wants to speak with you directly. It's a trap. Probably. Sienna's lips curved into something predatory. But he came alone and he's carrying a message sealed with Victor's mark. Whatever he has to say, it's important enough that they risk sending someone. Dorian was quiet for a moment. Bring him to the main hall. Full security. I want 10 vampires in the room and 20 more within earshot. If he so much as twitches wrong, Sienna, you have permission to remove his head. With pleasure, my king. She left and Dorian turned back to me. Stay close during this meeting. Don't speak unless spoken to directly. Werewolves respect strength, and right now, the fact that you're standing beside me is a show of strength. I thought we were equals. We are, but to them you're leverage. Proof that I care about something beyond my own survival. I need them to see you as untouchable. He moved to a wardrobe and pulled out a black coat lined with silver thread. When he put it on, the transformation was immediate. He looked taller, colder, more dangerous. This was the Vampire King in full, and I was about to stand beside him and pretend I belonged there. The main hall had been rearranged for the meeting. Dorian sat in a high-backed chair that looked uncomfortably like a throne. Sienna stood at his right hand, one hand resting casually on the hilt of a silver knife. And I stood at his left, trying to look confident instead of terrified. The werewolf who entered was younger than I expected. Maybe 30 in human years, with shaggy brown hair and eyes that shifted between human and wolf. He wore leather armor marked with symbols I didn't recognize. He stopped 10 feet from Dorian's throne and inclined his head slightly. Not a bow werewolves didn't bow to vampires, but an acknowledgement of temporary truce. Vampire King, I am Gareth II. I come under white flag to deliver a message. Speak. Dorian's voice could have frozen the sun. The werewolf pulled a sealed letter from his coat. Sienna moved forward, took it, checked it for traps, then handed it to Dorian. He broke the seal and read in silence. When he finished, he set the letter aside and looked at the werewolf messenger. Tell your alpha that his terms are rejected. If he wants Bloodstone Valley, he can negotiate like a civilized creature instead of plotting assassination. The alpha expected you would say that. The werewolf's eyes flicked it to me. He also expected you would have a new human pet by now. Victor was right about that much. Watch your tongue, Sienna growled. The werewolf ignored her, his gaze still fixed on me. She doesn't look like much. Are you sure she's worth starting a war over King Ashcroft? I felt Dorian tense beside me, felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. But before he could respond, I stepped forward. I have a name, I said, keeping my voice steady. It's Elara Thorne. And whether I'm worth anything isn't for you to decide. The werewolf's eyebrows rose. The pet has claws. I'm not a pet, I'm a partner. I glanced at Dorian. And if your alpha thinks he can use me as leverage, he's welcome to try. But he should know that I don't scare easily. I've survived worse than werewolves. For a moment, the hall was absolutely silent. Then the werewolf did something unexpected. He laughed. You've got spine, human. I'll give you that. He looked at Dorian. Maybe she is worth fighting for. I'll tell the alpha what you said, but I should warn you, he's not the negotiating type. He'll come with his pack, and he'll take what he wants. Let him try. Dorian stood, and even the werewolf took an involuntary step back. This castle has stood for 1,000 years. It's survived far more dangerous enemies than one ambitious alpha and his pack. If Gareth wants a war, he'll get one. But he won't win. The werewolf inclined his head again. 3 days, Vampire King. When the full moon rises, we'll be at your gates. Try not to lose your mind before we get there. He turned and left, and the moment he was gone, the tension in the room exploded into action. Vampires rushing to secure defenses. Sienna barking orders. Dr. Aldrich already moving toward the medical wing. But Dorian just stood there looking at me. You didn't have to do that, he said quietly. Do what? Defend yourself. Defend us. He moved closer. I would have handled it. I know. But we're partners, remember. That means I get to handle things too. A small smile touched his lips. The first genuine smile I'd seen since the alarm bells rang. Partners, he agreed. Though I should warn you, Elara Thorne, you're developing a reputation. The werewolves will be talking about the human who stood up to a pack messenger. Victor will hear about it, and he'll adjust his plans accordingly. Good, I said, surprising myself with the fierceness in my voice. Let him adjust. Let him worry. Let him wonder if maybe, just maybe, he's underestimated us. Dorian's smile widened. 3 days, he said softly. 3 days until the full moon. Until the werewolves attack. Until we find out if the bond between us is strong enough to hold back centuries of curse. He held out his hand and I took it without hesitation. 3 days, I agreed. Then we'll show them what happens when they underestimate kindness. His cold fingers closed around mine, And somewhere in the distance, I heard the first howl of wolves gathering in the mountains. The war was coming. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't facing it alone. 3 days passed in a blur of preparation, or rather what I thought were 3 days. On the morning of what should have been the day before the full moon, Dorian found me in the library. His face was grim. "We have a problem." I set down my book. "Another one, the full moon isn't tomorrow." He placed a piece of parchment on the table. "It's tonight." Ice flooded my veins. "What? But you said—" Victor lied. He sent false information in his letter to make us think we had one more day. Dorian's jaw tightened. "We have 12 hours to prepare. 12 hours before the curse takes hold, and we find out if you can truly anchor me." I stood, my legs suddenly unsteady. "Then we don't waste time talking about it. What do we need to do? You need to understand something first." He took my hand. "If this doesn't work, if I lose myself to the curse, Sienna and Dr. Aldrich will restrain me. But there's a chance I could hurt you before they can intervene. A chance the bond isn't strong enough. It will be strong enough. You can't know that. Neither can you." I squeezed his hand. "But I know that every hour we spend together, I feel the thread between us pull tighter. I know that when you're near, I feel warmth spreading from where we touch. I know that this is real, Dorian. The bond is real." He pulled me closer, resting his forehead against mine. "You're braver than anyone I've ever met." "I'm terrified," I admitted, "but I'd rather be terrified and trying than safe and useless." We spent the day together. Not preparing, not planning, just being together. Dorian showed me the winter garden where flowers bloomed impossibly in the snow. We walked through the library and he told me stories about books older than countries. We sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped while the sun moved inexorably toward the horizon. As evening approached, Dorian brought me to a room at the very top of the highest tower. Windows on all sides gave a perfect view of the mountains and the rising moon. "This is where I want to be when it happens," he said quietly. "Not in a cell, not in chains. Here with you watching the moon rise like it's just another night." Sienna and Dr. Aldrich joined us as the sun touched the horizon. They would stay back, give us space, but be ready to intervene if necessary. The sun disappeared, and in the east the full moon began to rise. I felt the change immediately. Dorian's hand went rigid in mine. His breath, the breath he didn't need, came faster. His eyes began to shift, taking on a reddish tint. "Elara." My name came out strained. "It's starting. I know, I'm here, I'm not going anywhere." The moon climbed higher. Dorian's grip tightened until it was almost painful. His fangs elongated. His pupils contracted to thin slits. A low growl built in his chest. "Talk to me," I said. "Tell me who you are." "Dorian Ashcroft." His voice was rougher now, barely human. "Vampire King, 523 years old. I don't want to hurt you." "You won't. Look at me, Dorian. Not the moon, me." His eyes snapped to mine and I saw the battle raging inside him. The curse pulling him toward mindless hunger. The bond pulling him toward humanity. And me standing between them, refusing to let go. "Tell me about Serafina," I said. "What?" The question seemed to surprise him, pulling him back from the edge. "What did she look like?" "Brown hair, blue eyes, laughed like music." His breathing slowed slightly. "She was kind, brave, stubborn as hell." "Sounds familiar," I said softly. "What did you love most about her?" "She saw me, not the vampire, not the king, just me." His grip loosened slightly. "Like you do." The moon rose higher, but I kept talking, kept asking questions, kept pulling him back every time I felt him slipping away. "What's your favorite memory of her?" "Dancing. She loved to dance. We'd sneak away from the court and just dance in the moonlight." "Dance with me now." His red-tinged eyes focused on me with difficulty. "What? Dance with me. Show me that you're still in there. Show me that the curse doesn't own you." For a moment I thought he couldn't, thought the curse had taken too much. Then slowly he pulled me closer. One hand still gripping mine, the other settling at my waist with trembling control. And we danced. There was no music, just the sound of our breathing and the distant howl of wolves. We swayed together with the full moon blazing overhead and the curse screaming for blood. But Dorian didn't let go. I felt the thread between us pull tighter, felt the warmth spread from where we touched, felt something ancient and powerful bend under the weight of something simple and human. Connection, choice, love. I started to hum, an old song my father used to sing, a lullaby about the moon and the stars and the night being just another friend. Dorian's growling quieted, his breathing steadied. The red faded from his eyes, leaving only silver. We danced through the peak of the moon's power, through the hour when the curse should have been absolute, through the moment when centuries of suffering should have broken him completely. But he held on to me, held on to his humanity. When the moon finally began to sink toward the western horizon, when the worst of the curse's power began to wane, Dorian stopped dancing. He pulled back just enough to look at me, his eyes wide with wonder. "It worked," he whispered. "You anchored me. The curse is still there, but it's quiet, like a distant storm instead of a hurricane." I laughed, half relief, half hysteria. "We did it! We actually did it!" "No." He cupped my face in his hands, careful despite the lingering tremor. "You did it. You brought me back. You held me together when I should have fallen apart." Behind us, I heard Sienna let out a breath she'd probably been holding for an hour. "How do you feel?" Dr. Aldrich asked. "Like I've been fighting a war." Dorian's voice was rough but steady. "But I'm still me. Still human, or as close as I can get." He looked at me. "Because of her." The moon continued its descent. The worst was over. We'd survived. Together. "I need to tell you something," Dorian said, still holding my face. "Something I was too afraid to say before. You can tell me later, when you're now, while the moon is still up, while I can still feel how close I came to losing you." He took a breath he didn't need. "I love you, Elara Thorne. I love your kindness and your courage and the way you refuse to be afraid of me. I love that you really see me the way Seraphina did. And I love that you chose to stay even when staying was terrifying." Tears blurred my vision. "I love you too," I whispered. "I think I have since the moment you caught me in the snow and looked at me like I was something precious instead of something broken." He kissed me then, gentle and careful and absolutely certain. And as the full moon sank below the horizon, I felt the bond between us settle into something permanent, something unbreakable, something worth fighting for. The sun rose over Nightshade Castle, painting everything in shades of gold. The curse was survived, but Victor Ravenscar was still out there, and justice had yet to be served. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we deal with Victor." Dorian's voice hardened. "He tried to make me fail, tried to prove that loving you made me weak. He's going to learn exactly how wrong he was." "How?" His smile was sharp enough to cut. "We call a council, a formal gathering of every vampire in the territory. We present evidence of Victor's conspiracy, and we let him explain to the assembled court why he thought it was acceptable to murder one Moonlight Anchor and try to destroy another." "A trial," I said. "A reckoning." He took my hand. "And you'll stand beside me through all of it, as my partner, my anchor, my equal." 3 days later, the trial began. The Great Hall had been transformed. 200 vampires filled the space, every vampire in the territory summoned by Dorian's command. They sat in concentric circles, witnesses to justice. At the center stood a raised platform. Dorian sat in his throne wearing the full regalia of the Vampire King. I stood at his right hand wearing a silver gown Sienna had found for me. And at his left stood a man I'd never seen before, tall, ancient, with eyes like storm clouds. "Lord Thaddeus," Dorian had explained earlier. "He represents the Alliance, the governing body that oversees all vampire kingdoms. Victor can't escape Alliance justice." The doors opened and Victor Ravenscar was brought in. He was smaller than I'd imagined, thin with graying hair and eyes that darted nervously around the room. He wore chains of pure silver that burned his skin wherever they touched. "Victor Ravenscar," Dorian's voice filled the hall. "You stand accused of conspiracy, murder, and treason. How do you answer not guilty?" Victor's voice was reedy. "I have done nothing wrong. I was protecting our kingdom from human corruption." "By murdering Seraphina 5 centuries ago," Dorian interrupted. "By attempting to use Elara Thorne as leverage to destroy me during the full moon. By allying with werewolves against your own king." "I have proof," Victor snarled. "Proof that humans weaken you. Proof that you're unfit to rule." "Then present it," Lord Thaddeus said calmly. "The Alliance is listening." Victor fumbled with his chains, trying to gesture. "The girl, she's made him soft. He survived the full moon because she anchored him. That proves he needs a human crutch to maintain control." A murmur ran through the assembled vampires. Dorian stood. "Elara, would you come forward?" I stepped onto the platform, heart pounding. "Tell them," Dorian said gently. "Tell them what happened during the full moon." I took a breath and spoke to the assembled court. The curse tried to take him. I felt it pulling him toward darkness, toward mindless hunger. But I also felt the bond between us, the thread that connected him to his humanity. I didn't fight the curse for him. I reminded him who he was. I gave him something to hold on to when everything else was trying to tear him apart. I looked at Victor. That's not weakness. That's strength. The strength to accept help. The strength to trust someone. The strength to choose humanity over isolation. Pretty words, Victor spat. But you're still human, still fragile, still a liability. Then let's talk about liabilities, Isolde said, stepping forward. I hadn't known she would be here, but seeing her gave me strength. She held up the contract. This is a document signed by our mother, Rowena, and countersigned by Victor Ravenscar. It promises to deliver my sister to him for $5,000, to be used as leverage during the full moon. She handed it to Lord Thaddeus, who examined it carefully. And this, Isolde continued, producing another paper, is correspondence between Victor and Alpha Gareth of the Werewolf Pack. It details their plan to attack Nightshade Castle, kill the king, and divide the territory between them. More papers followed. Dr. Aldrich came forward with medical records proving the silver and venom poison used on Serafina matched compounds Victor had stockpiled. Sienna presented testimony from vampires Victor had tried to recruit to his conspiracy. The evidence mounted. Undeniable. Damning. Finally, Lord Thaddeus stood. Victor Ravenscar, the evidence against you is overwhelming. The Alliance finds you guilty of conspiracy murder and treason against your king. Victor's face went white. You can't. The sentence is exile to the frozen wastes. You will be stripped of all titles, all property, and all rights within vampire society. You will live out your immortality in isolation in a place where no warmth exists, where you will have centuries to contemplate the cost of your choices. Two vampires dragged Victor away, still protesting, still insisting he'd done nothing wrong. When the hall was quiet again, Lord Thaddeus turned to Dorian. You have proven your fitness to rule King Ashcroft, and you have found something rare, a true Moonlight Anchor. The Alliance recognizes Elara Thorne as your consort and partner. She will have full rights and protections under vampire law. He looked at me. Welcome to Immortality's Edge, Miss Thorne. You have chosen a difficult path, but if tonight's events prove anything, it's that you're strong enough to walk it. The trial concluded, the vampires dispersed, and finally it was just Dorian and me standing in the empty hall as morning light streamed through the windows. There's one more thing, Dorian said. He knelt on one knee, pulling out a ring I'd never seen before. Elara Thorne, will you marry me, not because I need an anchor, not because of the curse or the bond or any of it, but because I love you. Because you've brought warmth back into my world. Because I want to spend whatever time we have, whether it's 50 years or 500, standing beside you. I pulled him to his feet and kissed him before answering. Yes, I'll marry you as your equal, as your partner, as your anchor and your love. He slipped the ring onto my finger, a band of silver with a crescent moon and a star. It was Serafina's, he said softly. I think she would have wanted you to have it. The sun rose over Nightshade Castle, and for the first time in 5 centuries, Dorian Ashcroft stood in its full light. Well, not full light, but dawnlight, gentle and golden, filtered through the windows of our bedroom. I woke to find him standing by the window, one hand resting on my rounded stomach. Good morning, I murmured. Good morning, my love. He kissed my forehead. How are you feeling? Like I'm growing a half-vampire baby who keeps kicking me at odd hours. He laughed, a sound that still made my heart sing because it was so rare for so long and now happened every day. 6 months had changed everything. Nightshade Castle flew a new flag now, a silver moon on a midnight blue field with a golden sun rising behind it. Vampire and human darkness and light together. I'd learned I was pregnant 3 months after the trial. Dr. Aldrich had been cautiously optimistic. The baby would be what he called a daywalker, able to tolerate sunlight, better than full vampires, a bridge between two worlds. The castle had adapted. We now had human advisors working alongside vampire council members. Sienna had trained a security force that included both species. Dr. Aldrich ran a medical program that served the whole mountain region, vampire and human alike. And Frostmere had changed too. Dorian and I had returned there 2 months ago. Not in secret, but openly, riding through the main street in a carriage bearing the Nightshade crest. Rowena had been arrested. She was serving 5 years in prison for selling me and faced additional charges for fraud and child endangerment. The $5,000 Victor had paid her was seized and donated to the new hospital the castle was building in Frostmere. Gideon Grey had come to apologize. I'd accepted his apology but made it clear that chapter of my life was closed. Last I heard, he was working at the new hospital trying to become someone better than he'd been. And Isolde, wonderful brave. Isolde had married Sienna in a ceremony that brought vampires and humans together in celebration. They lived in the castle now, helping to run the new cultural exchange program. What are you thinking about? Dorian asked, his hand still resting on my stomach. How much has changed? 6 months ago, I was freezing to death in a blizzard. Now I'm married to a vampire king pregnant with a daywalker baby and watching you stand in sunlight. Not full sunlight, he corrected, but more than I've seen in 500 years. Because of you. Because of us, I corrected. He pulled me into his arms, careful of my growing belly. I have something to tell you, he said. Lord Thaddeus contacted me yesterday. He wants to know if we'd be willing to help other vampires find their moonlight anchors. To teach them what we've learned about the bond. What did you tell him? That I'd ask my wife first. We're equals, remember, partners in everything. I thought about it. About all the vampires out there suffering through full moons alone. About all the humans who might have the gift of anchoring but never knew it. Yes, I said, let's help them. Let's show them that warmth can exist even in the darkest places. That connection is possible. That love doesn't make you weak, it makes you stronger. Dorian kissed me, and I felt the bond between us, that thread that had saved his life and transformed mine, pulse with warmth. Outside our window, the sun continued to rise. In the valley below, Frostmere was waking up, its new hospital serving patients, its new school teaching children that vampires and humans could coexist. And in the frozen wastes far to the north, Victor Ravenscar shivered in eternal cold, learning, too late, that isolation was the only true weakness. I thought about my mother's words, spoken so long ago. Kindness is the stitch that holds the world together. She'd been right, but she'd missed something important. Kindness wasn't just about holding things together. It was about bringing warmth to cold places, about choosing to help when it would be easier to walk away, about hugging a stranger in a blizzard because that's what decent people do. And sometimes, just sometimes, that simple act of kindness could change everything. What are you smiling about? Dorian asked. I'm thinking about how I saved a vampire king by accident. You saved me on purpose, he corrected. You saw someone you thought was dying and you chose to help. That wasn't an accident. That was who you are. He placed his hand over mine on my stomach, where our child grew part vampire, part human, all hope. They say power doesn't always roar, I said softly. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's a girl in a blizzard who refuses to let a stranger die. Sometimes it's a king who chooses love over fear. Sometimes it's just the belief that even in the darkest night, the sun will rise again. And it always does, Dorian said, looking out at the golden dawn, because of people like you, people who keep the fire burning. We stood together in the sunrise, my hand in his, our child, between us, and I knew with absolute certainty that we would face whatever came next the same way we'd faced everything else, together as equals, as partners, as proof that warmth could survive even the coldest nights. If you were stubborn enough, brave enough, kind enough to keep the fire burning.